daily morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. It's great to see you, Gaur Sharam Prabhu. Happy to be here with you this morning and with everybody else. And okay, today we're reading from the ninth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the ninth canto, the ninth chapter, and the text is number 29. It's a very interesting verse, a very interesting little section of the Bhagavatam. I'll quickly read the verse. I'll briefly read it myself, and then we'll get right into it. So the verse is, Esha hi brahmano vidvams tapa shila gunan vitaha arirad ha yishur brahmaha mahaparusha sangjitam sarvabhutatma bhavena bhutesh vantar hitam gunai. Translation. And this is this is a very interesting, maybe I should give, before I get into the translation, a little background here. It's kind of, Bhagavatam turns into a bit of a horror story right here. We have a man eating Rakshasa who has come across a Brahmana and his wife who were in the act of making love in the forest, right? So, we can presume they're naked, they're in the forest, they're having sex. And then this, he was a king. He was a good king coming in a good lineage, but he had been cursed. And he had been cursed to become, for some period of time, to become a man-eating Rakshasa, which was something that, when that was in him, I don't know what it exactly means. Like, I would assume that, for his ability to eat another human body alive, you would have to have sharper teeth and claws. I don't know how it manifests. But, he turns into this creature and he eats human beings, and so it's something that he can't control. It's a lower nature that's coming out in him in a very powerful way. And so when he comes across this couple, a Brahmana and his wife, he immediately has the urge to eat the Brahmana. And now we're hearing the words of the wife of the Brahmana, and she speaks out. And she speaks out powerfully. She speaks out with clarity. Again, it's a very bizarre kind of circumstance that she's speaking in. She's just, obviously in a very vulnerable position, naked, and having been, engaged the way that she was, and suddenly interrupted by this horrible, man-eating person. But she has a kind of level-headedness and clarity that she speaks with. Almost like a guru, she speaks now to the king, and tries to wake him up, tries to get him to understand, hey, this isn't you. Maybe I'll read a couple verses before, just briefly. She's speaking to him, and she says, well, actually, let me just read the verse first. I'll read the verse first, and then we'll get more into the background story. But this is part of her plea to the king, who's currently a Rakshasa, to please spare the life of her husband. And here's the reasoning, that part of the reason that she gives. She says, here is a learned, highly qualified Brahmana, engaged in performing austerity, and eagerly desiring to worship the Supreme Lord, the Supersoul, who lives within the core of the heart of all living beings. That was her primary argument here. The primary reason why, hey, wake up. You're not a Rakshasa. You're a good king. You're a Rajarshi, right? You're a saintly king. Try to remember that right now and try to understand what you're about to do. You don't want to do this. He's a learned, qualified Brahmana. He's engaged in performing austerity. He's eagerly desiring to worship the Supreme Lord, the Supersoul, who lives within the core of the heart of every living entity. You can't kill this person. So here's the purport by Srila Prabhupada. He says, the wife of the Brahmana did not regard her husband as a superficial Brahmana, who was called a Brahmana merely because he was born in a Brahmana family. With that sentence, Prabhupada is addressing a reality, right? That particularly in India, throughout India, that the true pure Varnashram Dharma has been largely corrupted, and people are regarded as a Brahmana not necessarily based on their qualification, but commonly they're regarded as a Brahmana based on the family that they're born in. So here we see that the queen, she's not saying, or I'm sorry, the wife of the Brahmana, she's not saying spare him because he was born in a Brahmana family. That wasn't her argument. Her argument was spare him, he's a Brahmana. Look at his qualifications, which establish clearly that he is a Brahmana. That's how she was speaking. So Prabhupada continues, rather, this Brahmana was actually qualified with the Brahminical symptoms. Yasya yal lakshanam proktam, from the 7th canto, 11th chapter, text 35, which is basically a very clear statement. I'll read it. Let me pull that up. That verse reads, if one shows the symptoms of being a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, as described above, which was previously described, I believe this is Narada Muni speaking, even if they have appeared in a different class, they should be accepted according to those symptoms of classification. It's a very clear statement coming from practically the highest authority. This is the guru of Vyasadeva himself, right? This is the guru of that person who edited and composed and presented the Vedic scriptures. You can't find a higher authority than Narada Muni. All of our teachings on Varnashram Dharma, on, you could say, the what these different classes are, it's all coming through the Vedic literature, which is composed by Vyasadeva, whose guru is Narada. So if he's got something to say about it, then he's accepted as an authority on this particular subject. And he's saying that even if whatever family one is born in, their Varna is determined not by their birth, but by their qualifications, and they should be accepted according to their qualifications. Okay, important, a very important point. So Prabhupada continues, the symptoms of a Brahmana are stated in Shastra. This is from the Bhagavad Gita, text 1842. Shamo dhammas tapa saucham kshantir arjavamevacha jnanam vigyanam astikyam brahma karma svabhavajam. Peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, wisdom, knowledge, and religiousness. These are the qualities by which the Brahmanas work. Prabhupada continues, not only must a Brahmana be qualified, but they must also engage in actual Brahminical activities, right? So they should have the qualities, but also they should be performing the duties, the work of the Brahmana. Simply to be qualified is not enough. One must engage in a Brahmana's duties. The duty of a Brahmana is to know Parabrahman, Krishna, Parabrahma, Paramdhama, Pavitram, Paramam Pavan. Because this Brahmana was actually qualified and was also engaged in Brahminical activities, Brahma karma, killing him would be a greatly sinful act, and the Brahmana's wife requested that he not be killed. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So, this is an interesting chapter of Bhagavatam. It's a chapter that's like, it's just kind of following a lineage, right? And it's building, it's kind of like a river that's flowing down, and it's going to open up, in one sense, it's going to open up with Lord Ram. Like if this chapter and the previous chapter is like a river, it's following a particular birth lineage, coming down, that will open up in the activities of Lord Ram. And when we get to Lord Ram, we're going to hear like somewhat long elaboration on his pastimes. But meanwhile, as it's going down the chain, it's mentioning a lot of the names that are being mentioned are just being named different kings. Their names are being mentioned, and maybe just like one, maybe nothing's being mentioned about them, just their names being listed. Sometimes they're being mentioned and just like one little detail about their life is being mentioned. So this chapter is just going down that lineage. And within the Bhagavatam, the stories, they largely develop out of, you could say, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6 lineages. You have from Lord Brahma, first person, in the universe is obviously Lord Vishnu. He's like the soul of the universe. He's the one that supports, gives all life to the universe. It's his consciousness that pervades the entire universe. From his navel grows the lotus, upon which that lotus is born Lord Brahma. And then Lord Brahma is given the duty, the sacred service to populate that universe. And so he needs to create progenitors. And he begins by creating the 4 Kumaras, who unfortunately do not carry out his will and his desire to be progenitors and to create, further lineages. They decide they want to remain brahmacharis. But shortly thereafter, Brahma creates a list of sages. So from those sages come different lineages, and 2 in particular, Atri and Marichi. A lineage comes from each one of these. I'll speak about that in a minute. And then he also, from his body, was born Swayambhuva Manu and his wife Shatarupa. And from them they had 2 sons, Priyavrata and Uttanapad. They had 3 daughters, Akuti, Prashuti, and Devahuti. And so from Priyavrata comes a whole lineage that it goes down. We're going to hear about some of them in the Bhagavatam, particularly when we get to the teachings of Lord Rishabhdev, and then Bharat Maharaj. These become really important characters in Bhagavatam. And from Uttanapad, very, very interesting lineage that, first his son is Dhruva Maharaj, so obviously Dhruva's pastimes are really important in Bhagavatam. And that lineage goes down, and it goes down, and it goes down, and you get to some important other people. You get to King Vena, who was like the worst example of a king. And we hear about how the Brahmanas kill him, but they kill him with mantra. And then how from his body they churn Prithu Maharaj, who becomes, again, another important character. And that lineage goes down further till you get to King Prachinabarhi. His pastimes or the teachings to him become very important. The Prachetas, Daksha, so much comes down in that lineage. There's a lineage that's coming from Prashuti, which we don't hear. Or no, actually from Prashuti. There's one from Akuti, the first daughter. We don't hear so much about that lineage. But from Prashuti comes Aditi and Diti, who are the mothers of both the Asuras and the Suras, the demigods and the Devas. So we're going to hear about them. And then from Devahuti comes Lord Kapila. The Lord himself takes birth in that lineage. And we hear Kasyapa Muni comes down through that, and so on. But now let's look on the other side. Those are all coming through Swayambhuva Manu, but from these original sages, there's the lineage that's coming down from the sun god appears in, and the important Kshatriyas appear in that lineage. And then there's another lineage that the moon god appears in, and very important people appear in that lineage. So from the moon god is coming from Atramuni, and that lineage goes down. It reaches it. You have Yadu eventually appears in that, and then you have the Yadu dynasty, and Krishna and the Pandavas will all appear in that dynasty. And then coming down from Marichi, which is the lineage that we're hearing about now, you have Vivishvan, the god of the sun, and you have Vaivasvata Manu, who is the current Manu that we are living under, and you have Vishvaku. You hear about this in the Bhagavad Gita, right? Then who's going to appear in this chapter is Katvanga Maharaj, and then Dasarat and eventually Lord Ram will appear here. So this chapter is kind of just like racing through all this lineage, kind of speeding through it, but it pauses a few times in this chapter. It pauses a few times to go a little bit deeper into a particular king. And so let's say it happens especially 3 times. One is going to be Kadvanga, who is interesting because he was a Kshatriya, like the kings in this lineage, and he was fighting on behalf of the Devas, and he was giving this unique blessing that you will know the moment when you're about to die, right? And then he says, well, when will it be? It's like right now. He was like, he had very short notice, but that there's a lesson in each one. Like when it pauses, again, this chapter is going to pause on a few of these kings and give a little bit more information. So with Khatvanga, there's a lesson to learn. And that lesson has to do with the realization that we're all going to die, and we're all going to die relatively soon, and the focus that we should place, in our life with this rare opportunity, very, very rare opportunity of human birth, how seriously we should take that. But another place that comes after what we're reading right now, but before what we're reading right now, there was another place where this chapter kind of paused and went into some detail rather than just listing names. And that was with Maharaj Bhagirati. Bhagirati to this day is famous throughout India because his forefathers were they had a motive, they had a goal. And that goal was to bring the holy water of the Ganges from the celestial worlds down to the earth. And so we hear, it goes into a little bit of detail about this, and there's a really important lesson to learn from this too. It was an opportunity to glorify the Ganges River itself, to glorify Ganga. But there's another really interesting lesson that comes out of that, and it's somewhat related to the lesson that we're reading in the story that we're reading now about Sodasa. But that had to do with the glories of the devotees, because Ganga, Bhagirati, he performs austerities to get the Ganga to come, and Ganga appears to him, and he makes his request, I want you to come down to the earth so that I can save all my forefathers, and so for many generations in the future, people will have the benefit of bathing in your waters. She says, okay, I'm willing to do that, but there's two issues, and I need you to think about this, and I need a solution to these issues before I come. And so one of them was like a very practical thing that, my water is like powerful and it's going to be coming down and it's going to hit the earth, and, something's got to support it and hold it when it comes. So his solution to that was that Lord Shiva himself has that power, has that strength to support the Ganges River. So she was satisfied with that solution, that Lord Shiva would sit there and in his locks, when the Ganga would hit him on the head first, and he could support that water. Okay, solved. But the second issue was a serious one, and that is that people will bathe in the water of the Ganges to become free from their sins, and then all those sins will become accumulated in her water, and what will she do then? Just being full of all of this bad karma. So Bhagirati, this is text from this chapter 9, text 6. Bhagirati says this. He says, and this is, the point is here is like, again, in this chapter, it's paused for a while, and we went a little bit deeper into Bhagirati and what he was about. And really what we get is we get this verse from him. Such a illuminating verse. It's about the qualities of the devotees and just how powerful they are. So he says, those who are saintly, he's speaking to Ganga, he says, those who are saintly because of devotional service and are therefore in the renounced order, free from material desire, and who are pure devotees, expert in following the regulative principles mentioned in the Vedas, and are always glorious and pure in behavior, and are able to deliver, they are able to deliver all fallen souls. When such pure devotees bathe in your water, the sinful reactions accumulated from the other people will certainly be counteracted. Why? Because such devotees always keep in the core of their hearts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can vanquish all sinful reactions. So Krishna here in this verse, he is called Agabit, right? Agabit, which means that he can, bit, he can counteract or conquer or slay. Agha, one's sinful reactions. And because the devotees are carrying him in their heart, they've got that power. So when they go into your water, they can counteract the whole thing. Now that is an important point. Now, in one sense, we all have God, all living entities have God situated in the heart. But not everyone is conscious of that. And not everyone enshrines God in their heart and allow his presence to fully shine, right? We all have God in the heart, but for some great souls, they've become so connected to God within the heart that God is shining through them, right? There's a beautiful analogy that Srila Prabhupada gives, and he does it in the commentary to text, a very famous text, Canto 1, Chapter 13, Text 10, where Vidura, before the battle of Kurukshetra, he spoke his truth. He tried to prevent the war. Duryodhana was so completely unaccepting of his advice. Dhritarashtra didn't step up and say, hold it, we should be listening to Vidura. Rather, he allowed Duryodhana to insult Vidura, to criticize him, and basically to throw him out of the kingdom. He accepted it. He accepted that. He walked away from the kingdom, and he went on pilgrimage. And then after the battle of Kurukshetra, when it was proven that all of his advice was good and should have been followed, now look, all your sons are dead, so many other people are dead, just because you didn't listen to my advice. He could have come back and said that, but he came back to help Dhritarashtra. But when he came back, now, Yudhishthira, who's been suffering, feeling responsible for the battle and so many deaths, and missing his elders, because now Bhishma is dead, Drona is dead, so many of his other mentors have passed away in that battle, but now Vidura comes back. Oh, what a sight for sore eyes, they say, right? Vidura walks back into that door. And so this is the verse spoken by Yudhishthira to Vidura. He says, my Lord Vidura, devotees like your good self are verily holy places of personified, because you carry the personality of God within your heart. You turn all places into places of pilgrimage. And then this is how Prabhupada starts his commentary to that verse, right? That because you have God in your heart, you turn all places into holy places. And Prabhupada writes, the personality of Godhead is omnipresent by his diverse potencies everywhere, just as the power of electricity is distributed everywhere within space, right? They have something called atmospheric electricity. That electricity is actually all throughout the atmosphere. As you go up higher, the voltage increases, and this energy can be harnessed, but like all around us, there's electric energy. So Prabhupada's writing, power exists and it's distributed everywhere in space. And he says, similarly, the Lord's omnipresence is perceived and manifested by his unalloyed devotees like Vidura, just as electricity is manifested in an electric bulb. A pure devotee like Vidura always feels the presence of the Lord everywhere. So the electricity is everywhere, but it can be collected and it can shine through a light bulb. And so in the same way, God is everywhere, but God is really shining through the devotee, right? His power, his illumination is coming through the devotee, because not only is he in the heart of that person, but that person has, in a sense, enshrined him there and worships him there. And now that energy of God is not hidden, but becomes manifested in a very tangible way. And so that's the lesson that we get from Bhagavati, that the devotees, because they're worshiping that God within the heart, because God's presence is not only there, but is really manifesting there in a very strong and tangible way, that they become agabit themselves. They become capable of slaying the bad karma that people are carrying around with them. Okay, so this idea of understanding God within the heart is already mentioned in this chapter. And then it begins to list more kings that come down in this lineage. And it's going on and on for a little while. And then we get to a character named Saudasa, who is also known as Kalmasapad, right? He was a good king. He made one simple mistake, actually, that there was a couple of Rakshasa brothers, and he killed one and he spared the life of the other one. And that other one came back, took revenge on him. It ended, without getting into the entire story, it ended with King Saudhasa being cursed, that I think for 12 years or so, for some period of time, he had to become a Rakshasa. No one wants that curse, right? You're a saintly king. You want to honor everyone. You want to protect everyone. And now you've taken on this horrible form that's uncontrollable within you. And sometimes you see people, and you just want to eat them, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's where we pick up today, is that we have that he's wandering through the forest. He comes upon a brahmana and his wife. They're engaged in sex, and his first thought is, I want to eat him. And the wife can see it in his eyes. She sees what's going on, and she's making her appeal. So let me just read a bit of what she said. She said, she you know, you think a lot of people would just start to scream and run, but she's like cultured, and she's a Brahmin, she's a Brahmini herself. And so she steps up, again, even in this very vulnerable position, she's naked and, out there in the forest alone, and, none others is a Rakshasa about to eat her husband. So this is what she says. She says, "Oh, hero, you are not actually a man-eater. Rather, you are among the descendants of Maharaj Ishvaku." Right? Remember who you are. And this is really the role of the guru. This is the role of all the great sages who are reminding us, hey, you're not this body. You're not this mind. This identity that you've adopted, currently in this body, that's not actually who you are. You are Brahman. You are spirit. You are the part and parcel of Lord Sri Krishna himself. Wake up. Don't act like this, right? So she's like saying that, reminding him of who he is, Indeed, you are a great fighter, the husband of Madhyanti. Don't you remember? You have this wife. You should not act irreligious in this way. I desire to have a son. Please therefore return my husband, who has not yet impregnated me. She says, O king, O hero, this human body is meant for universal benefits. If you kill this body untimely, you will kill all the benefits of human life. And then the verse that we're reading today, here he is. He's a learned brahmana, qualified, highly qualified, engaged in performing austerity. He's not wasting his human life. If you're going to eat someone who hasn't understood the value of the human life that they have, right? But you're about to eat someone who's fully utilizing that boon of being born in a human form. How can you eat this person? Not only that, it goes deeper still. He's eagerly desiring to worship the Supreme Lord, who lives within the core of the heart of all living entities. That means he's not only religious, but he's deeply spiritual, right? This is an important verse. We actually just on today's Wisdom of the Sages, Raghunath brought up this verse, but it's really important. It's important for us to think about, because in a large sense, we are Kanishta Adhikaris trying to elevate ourselves up to the Madhyam platform where our practice will become more powerful. We're beginners, we're neophytes that are trying to look at what are the shortcomings of the neophyte and remove them from our practice so that we can elevate ourselves to the Madhyam platform and ultimately, by the blessings of the devotees, someday reach the Uttama platform, the highest stage of devotional service. But within, in the 11th canto, there's a verse that defines the Kanishta Adhikari, or also called the Prakrita Bhakta, the beginner, the person that is not very deep, not very advanced. They're more like religious and not spiritual, right? And so let's hear this verse. I'll read the Sanskrit. It's Archayam eva haraye pujam ya shradheyate natad bhakteshu chanyeshu sa bhaktaha prakritaha smritaha. Really important verse. Not an easy verse to memorize here, right? Archayam eva haraye. Archayam refers to the Archavigraha, the deity in the temple, right? Eva means certainly, and Hariye means it's Hari, it's Lord Hari. Archayam eva Hariye. The deity in the temple is certainly the Lord. That's God. When I walk into the temple, I see that form of Krishna. He's playing the flute, right? It's threefold bending form, Tribhanga. He's got a peacock feather, right, in his turban. That's Krishna. That is God. I accept that as God. And then pujam yashodhatayate, with faith that this is God, I worship that form in the temple. It looks like Krishna. I can see that's Krishna right there. Okay, that's good. But because they're not very deeply advanced, they see Krishna only in that threefold bending form, but they don't see that Krishna is all pervasive. Krishna is everywhere. Krishna is in everyone. This is the vision that they don't have. That's got them stuck on that neophyte level. It's got them stuck on. They're religious. They walk into the temple. They show the respect. All the external stuff is there, but they're not spiritual. They don't see the spirit within every living being. They don't see God within every living being. So then the next line is natad bhakteshu. See, but they have that faith that this form is Krishna, but they don't have faith that Krishna is within the bhakta. Natad bhakteshu, chanyeshu. Or even for that matter, what to speak of everybody else, right? So they're not showing this, they don't have the same kind of faith that God is within the bhakta. They don't have the same faith that God is within every living being, so they're not acting on that faith. So it says sab bhakta prakrita smritaha. So this person is a bhakta prakrita or prakrita bhakta. They're a materialistic devotee. They're a beginner devotee. They're a kanishta devotee. They are, let's say, again, a religious devotee, but not like a deeply spiritual devotee. That is the, you could say qualification, or you could say disqualification of the kanishta adhikari. They're not seeing God. But now this brahmani is saying to the Rakshasa, please don't kill my husband, because he's not just born in a Brahmana family. He's a real Brahmana. He's qualified. He's learned. He's engaged in austerity. And beyond that, he's eagerly desiring to worship the Supreme Lord, the Super Soul, who lives in the heart, in the core of the heart of all living entities. So he's getting to the essence of it all, right? Of all the people in this world, if you look at all the living beings, there's so many animals and so many plants and so many insects and so many birds and there's just so many. And then amongst that you have humans who have so much more potential. And amongst the humans, most of them are wasting that potential, right? Most of them are not living up to that potential, or most of them are not deeply engaged in that potential. But here my husband is, right? It's so much to the point that he's eagerly desiring to worship God within the heart of every living being. That's where we need to go, and he's getting there. Please don't take his life, right? That would be so wrong. Unfortunately, he will hear this, but that lower Rakshasa nature will control him, and he's going to go ahead and take the life of that Brahmana. But this point is so important. This point, for our own development, when one transcends that kanishta adhikari level, then what will happen is that when one chants the holy name, one will be much more receptive to its potency, and one's advancement will become so much more quick. So for us as Bhakti practitioners, so much of our focus and our understanding should be focused on this idea that in order to chant the holy name deeply and benefit from it deeply, I need to begin to see God not only in the temple, and respect God not only in the temple, and bow down to God and worship God not only in the temple, but I need to see everybody as a temple. And I need to see the deity of Krishna within every body, right? I need to start seeing that way. Now I'm not just, because temples are important. Because generally when we're outside the temple, we may be engaged in so much nonsense. We may be talking so much nonsense. We may be engaged in so much. And when we walk in through the gate of that temple, we ring the bell, which means, Krishna, I'm entering into your room now. I'm announcing myself, politely announcing that I'm entering into your realm, and then I'm going to bow down to you. At that moment, we're meant to only our higher self should be manifesting, especially at that time, right? The way, the design, even architecturally, the design of the temple is meant to bring you to a higher state of consciousness, right? In India, and particularly like in these older temples, you could see because they were so well designed, you know, like you go to a temple, like say in Tirupati, right, where you, before you can take darshan, first you have to climb to the top of the hill, right? You have to take 35 or 3,500 something steps, climbing, preparing yourself, because in previous ages, previous centuries, even within a century, I'm sure people would walk for days, even months, at least one time. It's almost like Mecca, like I need to see Balaji in the temple. I need to see Lord Vishnu in the temple for as long before, farther back than history goes back. We don't know how long people have been going to that temple, how many great devotees have gone to that temple, great kings have gone to that temple. Everyone goes there at least once in their life to see Lord Vishnu there in that temple and to offer their life or heart to him, right? Even they shave their heads, even the women, they shave their hair, right? It's all part of, look, I'm going to go before you. And that darshan may be just for a moment in that temple, right? But you go through, you climb to the top of the hill. That takes hours, preparing yourself. Then you bathe in the holy tank, to kind of, again, wash yourself of your lower nature, come out in a pure state of consciousness. You may have shaved your head before you do that, so you're like, even, like you're shedding all the different layers of materialistic thought, you're trying to shed all this before you have that opportunity to see God, because when you see God, you want to be in the right state of consciousness. And then you have to wait in line for a very long time, sometimes even days, right? Sometimes even days. And then you finally, you're going through these ornate hallways and so on, and passing through, like, I'm going to meet him, I'm going to see him, I'm going to have the opportunity to offer my prayer to him. And then suddenly you're standing before him, right? So the whole design is to draw out of us, to extract from us a level of reverence for God. When we enter into that temple, it does it. Now that is designed for people. It will help people that are on that lower level of their practice, that see God only in the temple. And as long as I'm on that level, when I chant the holy name, I will not be so receptive to its potency. I need to come to a higher level. It doesn't mean I'm not going to go to the temple, but by going to the temple, the whole point for me going to the temple is it's going to train me and condition me in a way that I begin to see every body as a temple. And the same kind of love and reverence and respect that I show in the temple to God, and how I lift up my nature. And when I'm in that temple, I'm a better person. I don't talk about nonsense. I don't engage in nonsense. I need to be like that all the time, because I see God. I see every body as a temple. I'm constantly in the temple. I can't get out of the temple, right? I'm always locked in the temple, because everywhere I'm seeing God. And so, in the 13th chapter of the Gita, one verse I quote a lot, it says, "One who sees the super soul equally present everywhere," right? It's everywhere is a temple, right? Ever I look is Balaji, ever I look is Lord Vishnu. One who sees the super soul equally present everywhere, in every living being, every body is a temple. They do not degrade themselves by their mind, and thus they approach the transcendental destination. Right? They don't become degraded. It's like I'm always in the temple, so my behavior is always on a much higher level. And there's so many important verses about the God within the heart, about the Paramatma, that are in the Bhagavad Gita. One of the most famous is 1861. It's an often quoted verse. It's a beautiful verse. Ishvar sarvabhutanam hridesharjuna tishtati brahmayan sarvabhutani yantra rudhani mayaya. That Krishna says, the Supreme Lord is situated within the heart, and within everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of material energy. The body is just a machine, right? And I'm in that body, and the Supreme Lord is also in that body, and according to my desires and according to my karma, the Paramatma is leading me into this circumstance, into that circumstance. So what is Krishna's advice? Having known that, and this would really be his, I suppose, his last Paramatma verse in the Gita. This is just building up to the conclusion of the Gita. This is 1862. Krishna says, O Arjuna, O sign of Bharata, surrender unto him utterly. Right? God within the heart of you, God within the heart of every living being, surrender unto that Paramatma utterly. And by his grace, you will attain transcendental peace, the Param Shantim. You will attain the highest peace, right? When you actually recognize that super soul within yourself and within every living being, then you will get not just peace, but Param Shantim, that you'll get the highest peace. And when you have the highest peace of mind, the highest peace within your heart, then you can become deeply absorbed in that chanting of the holy names. Then its effect will be fully powerful, right? If the mind's not at peace, then our chanting is all distracted and distorted and confused, and it's not the same thing. But when you have that Param Shantim, then we chant that name. We're taking in its potency. So you attain not only Param Shantim, but also he says you will get prapsyasi shashvatam. You'll get that the sthanam shashvatam, the eternal abode. Right? You'll also go back to Godhead, more or less, is what it's saying. So this is the advice of Krishna as he's wrapping up the Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna is in the heart of every living being. Surrender unto him utterly. We need to try to recognize this is our practice. Until we realize this, we haven't gone deep. Until we realize this, we're kind of religious and not spiritual. I believe that that's Krishna in the temple. I'll bow down when I go in there. But when I'm dealing with others, am I seeing God within the heart of every living being? This is our challenge. This is the vision that we want to cultivate. And this is the vision that the Bhagavad Gita is cultivating. This is the vision that the Bhagavatam is cultivating. This is our challenge as devotees. So we are just about out of time, but I have time. If anyone would like to share their thoughts or questions, I'm happy to stick around with you for a little while.
Thank you so much, Kaustubha Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Prabhuji.
Especially, I loved the point how, through some devotees, Krishna's grace, Krishna's wisdom can actually glow through. So you are one such example, always presenting the wisdom of Srimad Bhagavatam so nicely. Thank you so much. Devotees request, if anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to share.
Hare Krishna, Kaustubha Prabhu. Wonderful class. Good morning. I miss Raghunath and his detours every time you speak outside the wisdom of the sages. Thank you so much. A quick question.
Yes.
You were talking about Paramatma and how one should surrender to Paramatma. God was in the heart. And my question is...
I'm listening to Bhagavatam class.
Oh, I think someone has their sound
somebody's
on.
Talking.
Yeah.
So when I was thinking, yeah, I should surrender to Paramatma Krishna in my heart, but then this thought came, whenever I'm considering going into the dark region of myself, to do some nonsense, Paramatma never interferes somehow. And how am I supposed to surrender to someone who never interferes with my nonsense, with my freedom to do nonsense?
Well, you say he never interferes, but I bet he does sometimes. But, that's our choice. In other words, we have the choice. Our freedom is to accept that shelter or not accept that shelter, right? And in one sense, that's the extent of it. And then based on that, he's directing us into this or that circumstance. But for instance, the analogy that I was using was just like in the temple. Quite frankly, and I'll share this, and I'm as guilty as most people. Really, I think in our temples we don't really always follow the right etiquette. Like, we have a lot of conversations in front of the deities and things like that we really shouldn't be doing. It's actually aparad. And so we do need to be trained in that better. But the idea is, even still, I think most of us are the level of our behavior will be elevated when we're standing before Radha Muralidhar in the temple. And so you're saying Krishna doesn't interfere with your freedom. Correct. He won't. He'll allow you. He'll allow all of us to choose whether we want to be aware of him or to forget him. He'll facilitate either. But we have to keep demonstrating that we want the former, that we want to remember him. So that's done through prayer, but it's also done through the practice. In other words, so again, if I see every living being, if I hear again and again throughout the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna is in the heart of every living being, if I hear verses like this that are saying this person's qualified because they desire to worship God within the heart of every living being, then the idea is I need to reflect on that, right? And this is our process of maturing. Not like we may accept that theoretically, but we're not living it. It hasn't matured in us, that realization. So we can mature that, realization, ripen it through reflection. And that means that I need to check myself. That's where the intelligence comes in, right? Like the intelligence kind of checks the lower nature and says, hold it. What are you doing? Theoretically that God is within the body of this person. So show that person respect and show God respect within that body. Even in simple ways, like there are things in Indian culture that are based on this that we don't have in Western culture. Like, for instance, touching someone with your foot, pointing your foot at somebody, or stepping over another person's body, right? Like in the Western world, I grew up not being conscious of those things at all. In Indian culture, they're very conscious of that. Why? Because they say that the soul and the super soul, the Paramama, is within the body of every living being. So you don't step over them. You don't touch them with your foot, because that's a temple. Because God is within. So that's an external way of cultivating an internal state of consciousness. And so that's really what we need to do is like we need to be in the association of people that are constantly reminding us of this, and we need to constantly reflect on it to mature that realization to the point of mature that knowledge to the point of realization. So the more that we focus on that, the quicker it will ripen. The more that we really want that, and the more that we're willing to practice that, and the more that we're willing to pray for that, and according to that intensity, it will mature more quickly. So that's our business, right? Every time we go to chant the holy name and we recognize, wow, my mind is really distracted, it's really not there, we should say to ourselves, why am I still living on this Kanishta level? I'm not respecting God within the heart of every living being. And therefore, the potency of this holy name is not, I'm not receiving it very well. Let me bow down to every living being. Let me be kinder to every living being. Let me recognize God within the heart and uplift my consciousness. It requires regular and ultimately constant reflection on this point to mature it. If we're willing to go through that internal process, that's the sign of someone that's a true spiritualist, right? Otherwise, I'm just a religious person, and that's okay, right? I recognize God in the temple. That's nice, I follow some of the rules as best as I can. That's a religious person. But a spiritual person, they want something more deep, right? And that means they have to commit in ways. They have to commit their body. They have to commit their words. They have to commit their mind, and particularly the mind in reflecting on this idea. Let me see God everywhere. That's the vision that I want, right? I don't want necessarily more money. I don't want more respect. I don't want, more fame. I want to see God everywhere. I want to see God within the heart of every living being. That's what I want. That's my desire. Let me let me clarify this in my own mind, and let me clarify this in my prayers to God on a daily basis, and let that desire be reflected through my actions, that I got one primary desire here. I want to see God within the heart of every living being. Let me work towards that. So it's going to, like anything else, it's going to require our focus. It's going to require, and it's not cheap. It's not going to come cheap. It's really the highest and deepest realization. But it's not cheap, but also Krishna is very merciful and the devotees are very merciful. So it's how quickly one can get that. That one can get that in one lifetime is an incredible blessing, an incredible mercy. And it's the mercy that we should strive for. So I hope that's a little bit helpful for everyone. Thank you. If anyone else has any thoughts they'd like to share, I see so many friends here. I see Athena, I see Rohini, I see Fardrani, Nicole, Pat, so many of you. It's so great to see you all. Kikoji, Indira.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Kartik.
I really appreciated the answer. I really appreciated the answer that you gave for Ananda Bihari Prabhu, especially like how it's a great mercy that we can strive for to actually go there. And as a devotee, I feel many times like in the process of engaging in devotional service, sometimes like that kind of we sometimes see Paramatma realization as lower than Bhagavan realization, but as aspiring devotees for Bhagavan realization, it seems like in a hurry or in an over enthusiasm, we overstep it and don't realize that kind of helps a lot in building a foundation. So how does like Bhagavan realization lead to the Paramatma realization also? We know it's a complete realization it gives, but how does it happen in a devotee's life practically?
Yeah, I mean, in one sense, your question sounds backward, right? It's like you would think it would be realize Paramatma and realize Bhagavan. And I think actually that is the way it works. But there is the factor that there's Krishna's mercy. Krishna's, you see, woven throughout the Bhagavad Gita, again and again, is information about the Paramatma, right? And information about seeing God everywhere. Seeing God within, not even within every living being, but within every atom. Krishna's, again, and many times, we'll come across verses that indicate that just like the soul, right, my Atma spreads, my consciousness is spread throughout my body. There's one little Atma, but it's powerful because it's made out of spiritual energy, and its consciousness pervades my entire body. So similarly, this universe, Lord Vishnu is the Atma of the universe. He's the soul of the universe, and his consciousness is spread everywhere, right? That realization, leads to what Krishna will call Samadarshana, seeing God within the heart of the living and seeing the spiritual equality of every living being, right? And when we have that, it helps us realize our own nature is spiritual more deeply. So then we also get this, the antasukha, the happiness that's internal. We become more in touch with that, right? Again, this is all about maturing to the level of true spirituality. I'm seeing God in everyone. I'm developing my happiness from within, And now because my happiness is from within, no matter what's happening externally, my mind is even, right? Things are potentially favorable or unfavorable. It really doesn't matter to me because I'm not searching for happiness through anything external anymore. I know the external things are going to change. So all of this, the Bhagavad Gita is reminding of us of this again and again and again. And it's a path of deepening spirituality. But also what Krishna does is he weaves through that. Like if that's a ladder climbing up to higher and higher stages of spirituality, then weaved through that is this factor of Krishna's mercy, right? That Krishna is super merciful to his devotees, that he'll preserve what they have and carry what they lack in a way that he won't with other processes. Like if you're not engaged in bhakti, but you're engaged in karma kanda, even jnana yoga or ashtanga yoga, it's not in the same way when Krishna says, mat bhakta, my devotees, this is how I relate with them, that he quickly delivers them, that they are very dear to him, that he delivers them, that he, and quickly, that he carries what they, he preserves what they have. It doesn't slip away from them. He carries what they lack. All that is there too. So, yes, we need to begin to see God everywhere before we're deeply absorbed in that name, and then we realize the person Krishna. But at the same time, if we're worshiping the person Krishna with faith, he can give us that blessing. He'll that we lack, right, and carry it for us, so that he can bless us. He can make the process that an Ashtanga yogi, it would require many lifetimes maybe, and a level of self-discipline that we don't have, a level of mental control that we don't have. He'll make up for that difference by his blessing and give us that vision, that is the vision of the sadhu, that we see God everywhere. That's Bhagavan stepping in and getting involved, otherwise messy minds.
Thank you, bro. I really appreciate the saying, like, preserving what we have and providing what we lack. Thank you so much. And I also feel you very aptly dressed up for the lecture with your t-shirt about Paramatma.
Oh, yes, that's right. I didn't even realize it. That's true. Right.
Any other devotees, you have any comment or questions, please feel free to share.
I have one.
I hope.
Anjalika, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I want to go back to the point of the wife essentially not freaking out.
Yeah.
Being able to speak so eloquently and really soberly to the demon. And of course, like, we are not on that platform, but I wonder, like, what can we do to actually get jostled a bit closer to that? And even, like, maybe to speak on her qualities too, what qualities that she had, that she was able to do that as well.
What a wonderful question. We see that not only was she able to, under this, it would have been hard enough if she were fully clothed and in some other circumstance and some Rakshas coming up to you, but like she was just caught like right in the middle of the act of having sex with her husband out in the forest, and then suddenly this, just kind of the worst situation you could imagine. And not only was she able to speak very clearly, but actually when he refused it, she had the potency to curse him, and the curse was effective, So she wasn't an ordinary person, but it seems that she had the same qualities that her husband had, right? The qualities that she was glorifying in her husband, she possessed herself, and therefore she wasn't shaken in this very difficult circumstance. If we go to the Bhagavad Gita, and we hear about like the meditation of the devotee who's gone very deep within, who's realized the super soul within, who's seen the super soul within, we can hear about that in chapter 6, and there's a series of verses. I like to quote these verses a lot because they show where yoga can go. But it says, this perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind, right, and to relish and rejoice in the self. I'm going to see my own self, and I'm going to see every other self, all in relation to the Paramatma. This is the spiritual vision that we're talking about. It says, in that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. And then this is important. It says, established thus, one never departs from the truth. And then this, and upon gaining this, they think there's no greater gain. And then finally, being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of the greatest difficulty. So in a sense, you could say she was kind of caught there in the greatest difficulty, such a difficult circumstance. Her husband is about to be killed by this man-eating Rakshasa. And she's got to stand up and try to speak to him in such a way. And she did it by appealing to his higher nature. It seems to me that she was a true Brahmini in this sense, that she could, she had those very same qualities that Prabhupada was listing in the purport that Krishna lists in the Bhagavad Gita, the true qualities of the Brahmana, peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, wisdom, knowledge, and religiousness, that she had them all too. It's that samatvam, it's that even-mindedness under all circumstances, that it's something that we're not meant to skip over. It's something that we're meant to churn within ourselves. It's something that we're meant we're meant to be monitoring the growth of that in our own life. And it appears that she had walked that path herself, and was quite advanced in it. We don't hear her name. We don't hear her husband's name. There's just this brief just a brief mention in the Bhagavatam, just a few verses. But we can see her qualities, and we can try to emulate those qualities. And obviously, a very special soul. Thank you, everybody. I've really enjoyed spending this time with you. Oh, and Gorsharam Prabhu, could you please do me the favor of sharing the link with me when it's
yes,
ready?
So sure. I'll do it. Yes,
Thank you
I'll
so
put it
much.
on your WhatsApp.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
His
Really-
best Kaustubha Prabhu ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you all for spending this time together. And look forward to seeing you all soon, hopefully. Thank you so much.